Have you ever wondered what happens when the person you've cherished and cared for your entire life starts to feel like a weight you cannot carry? What do you do when the bond of love and respect you thought was unbreakable suddenly feels fragile, unable to bridge the growing gap between generations? In today's story, we delve into the emotional journey of Helen, a devoted mother who finds herself struggling to fit into her son Mark's bustling household. The realization that her presence might be doing more harm than good is a heart-wrenching truth she must face. As Helen navigates the complexities of aging and family dynamics, her story will resonate deeply with anyone who has witnessed, or lived through, the challenges of balancing love, responsibility, and independence in later life. This is not just Helen's story. It's a narrative that many of us will relate to, or may face in the future. How do we respond when the people we love most wrestle with feelings of helplessness, isolation, or even resentment? How do we honor the sacrifices of our parents while maintaining the balance of our own lives? Stay with us as we uncover the deeply personal and transformative journey Helen embarks upon. You'll witness the delicate and often painful dance between family members as they strive to find harmony amid generational divides. From feelings of neglect to surprising acts of kindness, Helen's experience offers profound lessons on family, responsibility, and the healing power of understanding. By the end of this story, you'll discover the importance of rethinking the way we care for our aging loved ones. What does it truly mean to honor their dignity while balancing the realities of our own lives? This is a question we all must answer, and Helen's story provides invaluable insights into navigating these emotional crossroads. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our videos. Your support is incredibly meaningful to me, and if you find this video impactful, please like and share it with others who might benefit from its message. If you're intrigued by this topic, let me know by commenting 1 below. If you have suggestions for improvement, comment 0, and share your thoughts on how I can make better content for you. Now, let's dive into this heartfelt story. Not far away, a middle-aged man in a crisp navy suit, none other than Michael, Helen's son, hurries through the station, juggling several bags of varying sizes. He looks every bit the picture of a busy professional just returning from a long day at work. When his eyes land on Helen, standing quietly by herself, his face lights up with a warm smile. He picks up his pace and quickly approaches her. "Mom, what are you doing here all by yourself? You didn't get lost, did you?" "Let me help you with that," Michael says, gently taking the bags from her hands, his tone a mix of concern and affection. Helen chuckles softly, brushing off his worry. "Oh, Michael, I'm fine. There's no need to fuss. This area doesn't even have proper addresses, so how could I get lost? I've been navigating my way around places long before GPS," she replies with a teasing smile, trying to reassure him. As they walk side by side, the sound of their conversation and occasional laughter fills the crisp evening air. Soon, they arrive at Michael's home in the city. The house is impressive, spacious, bathed in natural light, and meticulously decorated with modern furnishings and the latest appliances. Michael beams with pride as he opens the door wide for Helen. "Mom, take a look. This is our new place. Isn't it beautiful?" Michael says, his voice filled with excitement as he ushers her inside. Helen steps in and takes a slow, careful look around, her eyes widening at the sight of the sleek, sophisticated interior. The pristine countertops, the shiny stainless steel appliances, and the artfully arranged decor leave her momentarily speechless. It's a far cry from her quaint, humble home in the countryside. "It's stunning," she finally says, her voice tinged with awe. Before she can take it all in, a young woman appears in the hallway. Dressed smartly, with a subtle touch of makeup enhancing her natural features, she greets Helen with a polite smile. "This is Emily, Michael's wife." "Mom, this is Emily, your daughter-in-law," Michael says with a smile, gesturing towards her. Emily nods warmly, but Helen notices something fleeting in her expression, a shadow of discomfort, barely perceptible. Helen brushes it off, attributing it to the adjustments that come with welcoming a new family member into their home. In the days that follow, Michael and Emily go out of their way to make Helen feel welcome. They prepare elaborate meals, take her on shopping trips, and even accompany her on leisurely walks through the neighborhood. Helen finds herself marveling at this fairy tale-like existence, her heart swelling with gratitude. For a time, she feels as though she has found a new chapter of joy and belonging. But as the weeks go by, small cracks begin to appear in the veneer of perfection. Helen starts to notice subtle shifts in behavior. Michael and Emily remain polite, but there's an underlying distance, an unspoken tension she can't quite ignore. Emily, in particular, becomes more reserved. Whenever their paths cross, Emily greets Helen with a strained, awkward smile that feels more like an obligation than genuine warmth. One night, Helen is stirred awake by the low hum of voices. Curious, she tiptoes down the hall and stops just outside Michael and Emily's room. Their hushed conversation is muffled, but the words Helen manages to catch send a sharp pang through her chest. "Why does your mom make everything so uncomfortable?" Emily whispers, her frustration evident. "She's always hovering, always talking about how she used to do things." "Emily, she's my mom. She's getting older, and we need to be patient with her," Michael replies, his tone calm but weary. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Helen's heart sinks. She stands frozen, her breath shallow, as the weight of their words settles over her. The cold realization that her presence is not as welcome as she had hoped washes over her, leaving her feeling like an intruder in her son's life. That night, sleep eludes her. Lying in the darkness, Helen replays their conversation over and over in her mind. Her thoughts swirl with sadness and self-doubt. She had never imagined that the son she raised with so much love and sacrifice would see her as a burden, or that his wife would feel resentment towards her. As much as it pains her, Helen begins to understand that staying here may only strain their relationship further. By morning, she makes a quiet decision. She cannot let her presence cause division in her son's home. With a heavy heart, Helen resolves to take the next steps, no matter how difficult they may be, to restore peace and dignity for everyone involved. Helen decides it's time to leave her son Michael's home and return to the quiet comfort of her own house. The initial excitement and joy of living in the city had gradually worn off, replaced by an unsettling sense of discomfort. While she loved being closer to Michael, the bustling pace of urban life left her feeling out of place. This morning, as usual, Helen woke up early, a habit ingrained from years of tending to her family. She decided to prepare breakfast for Michael and his wife, Emily. When she stepped into the sleek, modern kitchen, she noticed the counters were already lined with ingredients and cooking utensils. Emily had already begun preparing their morning meal. "Oh, Mom, why are you up so early?" Emily said, her voice laced with polite surprise as she turned to see Helen. A quick look of astonishment crossed her face, soon replaced by a sweet but slightly practiced smile. Helen returned the smile, though a subtle discomfort tugged at her. "You know, as you get older, you just don't sleep as much," she replied lightly, brushing off the awkward moment. Inside, however, she couldn't shake the feeling of redundancy. It was as though she had become an outsider in a home that no longer needed her. Michael and Emily seemed to have their rhythm, one she wasn't part of. At the breakfast table, Michael sat engrossed in the news on his phone, his attention fixed on the screen. Meanwhile, Emily painted her nails, occasionally glancing up to exchange a few casual remarks. Helen watched them, her heart heavy with a quiet loneliness. She thought about the simplicity of her life back in the countryside, the neighbors who would drop by unannounced to share a laugh or lend a hand. Life there had been far less luxurious, but it was filled with warmth and connection. After breakfast, Helen instinctively began clearing the dishes, only to be gently stopped by Emily. "Oh, Mom, please don't worry about that. I've got it covered," Emily said, taking the plates from her hands with a friendly yet firm insistence. Helen hesitated, surprised by the gesture, but then forced a smile. "All right, then. I'll just step out for a little walk," she said, feeling a pang of uselessness. She left the house and wandered to a nearby park. The park was beautiful, with tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, birds singing melodies from their branches, and vibrant flowers adding bursts of color to the landscape. Helen found a bench under the shade of an old oak tree and sat quietly, watching the world move around her. People jogged, children played, and couples strolled hand in hand. But even in this lively environment, Helen felt a deep sense of loss, a longing for the simple, purposeful life she had left behind. Back in the countryside, Helen had spent her days tending to her garden and chatting with neighbors, sharing stories and laughter that filled the quiet hours. Here, amid the city's energy, she felt like a stranger. She tried to fit in, but the disconnect between her old life and this new one was hard to bridge. As she sat lost in thought, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. It was Margaret, an old neighbor from Helen's hometown. Margaret, carrying a shopping bag, noticed Helen and hurried over with a wide smile. "Helen, what are you doing here? I almost didn't recognize you," Margaret exclaimed warmly. Helen's face lit up at the sight of a familiar face. "Oh, Margaret, what a surprise," she replied, standing to greet her. The two women sat down together, and Helen poured her heart out, sharing the struggles she'd been facing. Margaret listened intently, nodding in understanding. After a long pause, Margaret sighed. "You know, these younger generations. They're always so busy with their careers and families. It's not that they don't care, but their lives are just so packed. But Helen, you can't stay cooped up at home, feeling this way. You've got to get out, meet people, and do things that bring you joy." Helen nodded slowly, realizing the truth in Margaret's words. She couldn't let herself sink into this loneliness. She needed to reclaim her sense of purpose and community. Inspired by Margaret's advice, Helen decided to register for a senior activity group at the local community center. "It would be wonderful to exercise a little and meet new friends," she said with a hopeful smile. Margaret patted her hand encouragingly. "That's the spirit, Helen. You'll see. It'll do you a world of good." As they parted ways, Helen felt a renewed sense of determination. She might have lost her sense of belonging here in the city, but she wasn't ready to give up on finding it again. The next morning, Helen, filled with hope and excitement, heads to the local community activity center. She had decided to join a dance class, hoping it would bring a sense of joy and connection to her life. When she steps into the dance studio, her excitement quickly fades into discomfort. The room is filled with young, vibrant women dressed in stylish, fashionable clothes, exuding energy and enthusiasm. Helen stands in the doorway for a moment, feeling out of place in a sea of youthful vitality. Just then, the dance instructor, noticing her hesitation, walks over and gently asks, "I'm sorry, but are you sure you're in the right class?" Helen's heart sinks as she realizes that this is not the class she had imagined. It's a dance studio geared specifically toward younger women, not the senior class she had hoped to join. Embarrassed and unsure of what to do, Helen turns to leave, her confidence deflating. But before she can make her exit, a voice calls out to her. A woman, a little older than the others, walks toward her with a kind smile. "Do you want to learn to dance too? Don't worry. There's always room for us. When you're ready to join in, we'll be happy to have you." Helen looks at her, grateful for the kindness, but her heart still feels heavy. She had hoped for a different experience, one where she could feel included and respected, not like a person on the outskirts. She feels the ache of loneliness creeping in once more. Over the past weeks, as much as she appreciated Michael and Emily's polite treatment, she couldn't help but sense their growing impatience. It wasn't just the bustling city that was uncomfortable. It was the subtle shift in her place within her own family. A few days later, as she's walking through the house, Helen slips and falls, injuring her leg. Pain shoots through her body as she lies on the floor, unable to move. Moments later, Michael rushes into the room, his face filled with worry. "Mom, are you okay?" "Let me get a doctor for you right away," he says, his voice panicked as he hurries out to make the call. Emily, always the composed one, stays behind. She applies ointment to Helen's leg and tries to comfort her. "Don't worry, Helen. The doctor will be here soon," Emily says in a soothing voice, though there's something in her tone that doesn't quite reach Helen's heart. Helen can sense it. There's a reluctance in Emily's actions, a sense of duty but not of genuine care. This makes Helen feel like an unwelcome guest in her own son's home. The chill of that realization settles deep within her, and she feels even colder as she lies there, unable to move. Soon, Michael returns with the doctor, who examines Helen and recommends she stay in bed for a few days. "You need to rest," the doctor says gently. "Mother, please take it easy. I'll let Emily take care of you while I go handle some things," Michael says quickly before rushing out the door, leaving Helen in Emily's care. Helen watches as Emily continues to tend to her, but her unease only grows. Emily is becoming more distant, less patient, and increasingly frustrated. At first, it's just small things. Times when Emily forgets to bring her what she needs, or when she snaps at Helen over trivial matters. But Helen feels it growing. Her presence here is an inconvenience, not a joy. One evening, as Helen sits on the bed, thirsty, she asks Emily for a glass of water. Emily, however, seems absorbed in her phone, ignoring her request. Helen waits for a long while, her throat dry, but there's no response. Finally, she struggles to rise from the bed, wincing with pain, and pours herself a glass of water. Just as she's about to sit back down, Michael walks in and sees her struggling. "Mom, what's going on? Why didn't you ask Emily to help?" Michael asks, his voice laced with concern. Helen glances at Emily, unsure whether to speak up. She knows that bringing this issue to light might only create more tension between them. Instead, she quietly shakes her head and replies, "It's fine, I can manage on my own." But Michael isn't convinced. His gaze shifts from Helen to Emily, and something in his expression changes. "Emily," he says sternly, "come here for a moment." Emily's face pales as she walks over to him, her eyes avoiding both Helen and Michael. He leans in and whispers something to her, his voice low. Emily's face darkens, and with a quick, uncomfortable glance at Helen, she storms out of the room. Helen, her heart heavy, watches her son sit beside her. He takes her hand, his touch warm, but there's an underlying tension in the air. "Mom, we know you're uncomfortable here. We're going to figure this out, okay? We'll make things right." Helen looks at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She doesn't want to make him feel guilty, but she knows deep down that the situation isn't as easy to resolve as he might hope. She pats his hand gently and says, "Don't worry about me, Michael. When the time comes, I'll return to where I truly belong." That night, Helen lies awake in her bed, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She thinks about the home she left behind in the countryside, her old house, the familiar sights and sounds, and the friends who had shared her life for so many years. The peace of that life seems distant now, replaced by uncertainty and discomfort. As she lies there, she knows it's time to make a decision. She can no longer ignore the feelings that have been growing inside her. Feelings of doubt, insecurity, and the constant awareness that she doesn't belong here in the city. She has tried to talk to Michael and Emily before, to express her concerns and her growing sense of isolation, but each time she hesitated, fearing that it would only make things worse. Now, as she lies there, she feels more certain that she cannot continue this way. Her thoughts are interrupted when she hears raised voices from the next room. Curious and a little anxious, Helen quietly gets up and walks toward the source of the noise. She opens the door just enough to peer inside and sees Michael and Emily locked in a heated argument. The words are harsh, echoing through the house. "Michael, you're always wasting money. What's wrong with you? You can't even control yourself," Emily yells, her face flushed with anger. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. "I'm spending my own money. What's the big deal? Why are you always getting on my case?" Michael shouts back, his voice strained. "You make me so angry." With that, Michael storms out, slamming the door behind him. Helen watches in silence, feeling a mixture of sadness and shock. She had always thought that Michael and Emily had a perfect marriage, but now she sees the cracks, something she had hoped to avoid acknowledging. Emily turns toward Helen, her expression stiffening as she notices her standing in the doorway. "Oh, Mom, don't mind us. We both have bad tempers sometimes," Emily says, offering a strained smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Helen sees the flicker of avoidance in Emily's gaze, and the weight of the situation becomes clear. She knows this argument is more than just about money. It's about everything that has been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. The tension in the air is undeniable, and it's becoming harder for Helen to ignore. Taking a deep breath, Helen steps closer to Emily, her voice calm but firm. "Emily, tell me honestly, are you two arguing because of my presence here?" she asks, her eyes searching Emily's face for the truth. Emily hesitates, her eyes darting nervously. For a moment, she doesn't answer, and then finally says, "Mom, you're overthinking it. Our arguments have nothing to do with you." But Helen isn't convinced. The weight of her suspicions presses down on her. She sighs deeply and shakes her head. "Emily, I know I'm causing trouble for you. I can see that you're not welcoming me here," she says softly, the words coming out as a mixture of resignation and sorrow. A blush of guilt creeps across Emily's face. She opens her mouth, as though she wants to say something, but no words come out. The silence between them grows, heavy with unspoken truths. Just then, Michael reappears. His eyes widen when he sees the two of them standing in the doorway, the air thick with awkwardness. He walks toward Helen and takes her hands gently in his. "Mom, I'm sorry. We were too harsh earlier," Michael says, his voice sincere but laced with regret. "Please, don't feel like you're in the way." Helen shakes her head, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "Son, you don't need to apologize. I know you both have your own lives and challenges. But I've made a decision. I'm going to return to the countryside to live," she says, her voice steady but full of the sadness she's been holding in for so long. Michael and Emily stand frozen, stunned by her words. They didn't expect this, didn't think she would make such a decision. "Mom, please, don't be upset," Michael says, his voice rising with panic. "This is your home. You don't have to leave." But Helen firmly shakes her head. "Son, I know you both are good people. I know you're doing your best. But I also know that my presence here is only causing you stress. I don't want to be the reason you fight or the reason you're unhappy," she says, her heart aching as she speaks. Michael and Emily are silent, the weight of her words hanging between them. They both know deep down that Helen is right. Her presence has created tension, and they have struggled to balance their own lives with the emotional demands of caring for her. But neither of them knows how to fix it. In the end, they cannot keep her. Helen gathers her things, packs her bags, and leaves their home with a heart full of regret and confusion. As she boards the train back to the countryside, she wonders to herself, "Why does my son treat me like this? After everything I've done for him, how did we get here?" She feels an overwhelming sadness, but at the same time, a quiet understanding begins to form within her. She knows that when older people leave, it's not just a physical departure, it's a part of life that must be accepted. Upon arriving back in the countryside, Helen breathes in the fresh air, the scent of the earth filling her lungs. The familiar landscape before her feels comforting, like a long-lost piece of herself coming home. As she steps off the train, the setting sun casts a peaceful glow over the distant hills, offering her a serene welcome. As Helen takes a deep breath of the fresh air, she hears a familiar voice calling her name. It's Margaret, a dear friend from the village, carrying a basket of vegetables as she walks home. "Mrs. Zen, where have you been? I haven't seen you in ages." Margaret calls out, her voice warm and welcoming. Helen smiles, her heart lifting at the sight of her old friend. "I just returned from the city," she replies, her eyes twinkling with relief. "I've decided to spend my remaining years here, in the countryside." Margaret chuckles and pats Helen's shoulder. "The city may have its charm, but it's nothing like the peace of our little village. Come on, let's get you home. We'll take good care of the old house," she says with a knowing smile. The two women walk together, chatting about the changes in the village, but Helen feels a deep sense of peace that she hasn't felt in a long time. She knows this is where she belongs, surrounded by the simplicity and warmth of her old life. The two women walk and chat, gradually making their way to Helen's old house. The house, though weathered by time, is surprisingly well kept. As Helen stands in front of the familiar structure, her eyes well up with emotion. The house, the small garden she once tended to, and the surrounding landscape, everything feels like a piece of her past has been lovingly preserved. The village has certainly changed in the years she's been gone. The once bustling streets are now quieter. Most of the younger generation has moved away to the city, leaving only the elderly and young children behind. But despite the quiet, there's a certain beauty in the simplicity. The fresh air, the rolling hills, and the peaceful surroundings are a balm to Helen's soul. It's a life that's not as fast-paced or materialistic as the city, but it holds a wealth of contentment that she's come to appreciate. Margaret, always eager to lend a hand, helps Helen tidy up the house. As they work, Margaret fills her in on the latest news from the village, sharing the changes and challenges the community has faced while Helen is away. Helen listens with a sense of nostalgia, the simplicity of village life drawing her back in. She reflects on her time in the city, materially wealthy but emotionally lonely. The city had been full of conveniences, yes, but it had never filled the void inside her. Now, returning to the countryside, she feels a sense of belonging and peace that she had lost long ago. Once settled in, Helen starts visiting her old friends. The village, though quieter, still holds the warmth of familiar faces and shared history. Each visit brings new connections and rekindles old friendships, and before long, Helen has formed a new circle of friends who make her feel welcomed and valued. Her days are filled with light-hearted conversations, tea, and the joy of simple pleasures. Meanwhile, in the city, Michael is lost in thought, replaying the events that led to his mother's decision to leave. The memories of the arguments with Emily, his mother's quiet resignation, and the helplessness in her eyes weigh heavily on him. He feels a deep sense of guilt and regret. "Emily, what did we do wrong? Why did things turn out like this?" Michael asks, his voice full of frustration as he sits on the couch, his brow furrowed in thought. Emily, looking less than pleased, responds with a sharp tone. "Michael, Mom didn't want to live with us. It's not our fault. We tried to make it work, but she had her own life to live. We can't change that." She pauses, her guilt starting to surface. She knows she hasn't been the most understanding, and the pressure of having an elderly person in the house has been harder on her than she initially realized. "Okay, I admit my attitude wasn't the best," Emily says, her voice softer now. "But we can't just leave her in the countryside alone. She's our mother. She deserves to be taken care of." Michael feels a weight lift off his shoulders at Emily's words. Finally, she seems to understand the problem, and he's relieved. He knows that the next step is to make things right with his mother, to show her the care and respect she deserves. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The very next morning, Michael drives Emily to the countryside to visit Helen. When they arrive and enter the old house, they are taken aback by what they see. Helen is sitting with her old friends, all of them chatting, drinking tea, and laughing heartily. The scene before them is so different from the one they left behind in the city. The joy and warmth in Helen's eyes as she interacts with the villagers is a stark contrast to the loneliness they had come to associate with her. Michael and Emily stand silently at the doorway, their hearts heavy with remorse. They watch Helen as she smiles and shares stories with the other elderly villagers. Her laugh is free, and there's a lightness to her that they haven't seen in so long. "Mom, we've never seen you so happy," Michael says softly, a trace of sadness in his voice. "When you were with us, you always seemed so worried, so disconnected. I didn't realize how much we were causing you to feel that way." Emily, her voice quieter now, speaks up. "Michael, have we done something wrong?" She looks at him with uncertainty, hoping for an answer that will ease the guilt they both feel. Michael sighs deeply, his mind reflecting on the past few months. "Yes, we haven't done enough. I always thought that providing a comfortable home and a good material life for you meant we were doing the right thing. But I overlooked your emotional needs. I didn't realize how much you needed to feel at home in our lives, to feel seen and heard." Emily listens, her heart sinking as she remembers her impatience and the many times she avoided Helen's attempts to connect. She realizes now that her actions, or lack thereof, had contributed to her mother-in-law's sense of isolation. "I see now. We were wrong. We should have done better." Michael nods in agreement, his face filled with regret. He knows that they have a lot of making up to do. They need to make amends, not just for Helen's sake, but for their own. The following day, Michael and Emily sit down with Helen to have an honest conversation. "Mom, we've been thinking about everything, and we're so sorry for how we treated you," Michael says, his voice thick with emotion. "We should have made more of an effort to make you feel at home with us." Helen listens to her son's apology, and though her heart feels full, she knows that her decision is already made. "You don't need to apologize, Michael," she replies gently, smiling through the pain. "I know you both have your lives to live. But I also know that my presence here is causing tension between you two. I don't want to be the cause of your unhappiness." Michael and Emily exchange a glance, knowing deep down that Helen is right. The best thing for her, and for their family, is for her to live in the place that brings her peace. "I've decided to stay here, in the countryside. It's where I belong," Helen says with quiet conviction. Michael and Emily are stunned. They hadn't expected her to make this decision so firmly, but they understood. After a long silence, they nod in agreement, knowing that this is what is best for everyone. Helen's life in the countryside continues to flourish. She feels a renewed sense of purpose and joy, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of old friends. Meanwhile, in the city, Michael and Emily continue to reflect on the lessons they've learned, vowing to never again take for granted the emotional needs of the people they love. Michael takes a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Emily, we need to apologize to Mom. We've been blind to how much she's suffered. We need to acknowledge our mistakes and find a way to make her life more fulfilling, to truly make her happy in the years ahead." After some discussion, Michael and Emily decide it's time to visit Helen. They make the drive to her small countryside home, their hearts heavy with regret but filled with determination to make things right. When they arrive, they find Helen sitting in her cozy living room, surrounded by the familiar comforts of home. Her face lights up when she sees them, and she offers them a warm, welcoming smile. "Oh, why are you two here? Come in, sit down, and have a cup of tea," Helen says, her voice full of affection. As they sit beside her, Michael and Emily exchange a look, the weight of their guilt pressing on them. Michael takes a deep breath, summoning all his courage to speak. "Mom, we're here to apologize. We know we didn't take good care of you, and in doing so, we caused you unnecessary pain." Helen looks at him, a slight surprise flickering across her face. Then, she smiles warmly, the lines of her face softening with understanding. "You foolish children. How could I ever blame you? I know how busy you both are. Life isn't easy, and I can see you've been trying your best. But I know we were wrong not to stay by your side more, to make sure you felt the warmth of the family." Tears well up in Emily's eyes as she hears her mother-in-law's words. She has always known that she wasn't perfect, but hearing the forgiveness in Helen's voice stirs something deep inside her. Helen turns to look at both of them, her eyes filled with love and compassion. "You've both recognized your mistakes, and that's enough for me," Helen says, her voice soft but full of warmth. "I forgive you." In the days that follow, Michael and Emily make a concerted effort to spend more time with Helen. They take turns visiting her in the countryside, helping her with household chores, chatting with her over tea, and taking her for walks in the fresh air. Helen's life begins to feel more vibrant, filled with the love and care of her children. The villagers, witnessing the effort Michael and Emily are putting in, praise them for their filial piety and kindness. They see the change in Helen. Her later years are becoming more joyful and more meaningful, thanks to her children's support. But as much as the days spent with Helen bring happiness, life continues to be unpredictable. Soon after, Michael receives a notification from his company that requires him to go abroad for a month-long business trip. Emily, too, cannot afford to leave the city for long due to her commitments. They are faced with a dilemma. Should they leave Helen alone in the countryside, or bring her back to the city with them? The decision weighs heavily on them. As much as they want to care for Helen, the reality of their busy lives complicates things. Michael and Emily are torn, and they can see the worry in Helen's eyes when they share the news with her. She doesn't want to be a burden, but at the same time, she doesn't want to be separated from them. "Michael, Emily, you don't need to worry about me," Helen says with a gentle smile. "I can take care of myself. You can focus on your work. I'll be fine." But Michael and Emily hear the resignation in her voice, and they know deep down that Helen is only saying this for their benefit. They cannot let her stay alone in the countryside, no matter how independent she claims to be. "No, Mom, we can't leave you here alone," Michael says firmly. "We've thought about this, and we want you to live with us in the city. We'll rent a bigger house, and that way, we can take care of you while still focusing on our work." Emily, too, adds, "Yes, Mom. We know we've made mistakes in the past, but we want to change that. We want to spend more time with you, to make you feel like part of the family again. From now on, we'll be there for you." Helen's heart swells with warmth as she listens to her children's words. She sees the sincerity in their eyes, and it brings her comfort. However, the thought of leaving her beloved countryside behind is not easy. She has lived here all her life, and it is difficult to imagine leaving it. After a brief moment of hesitation, Helen makes a decision. "All right," she says softly, her smile returning. "If you both think it's best, I'll come with you to the city." In the following days, Helen bids farewell to her old home and her friends in the village. Michael and Emily rent a spacious, bright house in the city, purchasing everything they need to make it a comfortable and welcoming environment for Helen. Life in the city is a new experience for Helen. Michael and Emily do their best to care for her, taking her for walks, helping her with chores, and spending time with her each day. Helen begins to adapt, learning how to use modern appliances and trying new things that she has never experienced before. Slowly, she becomes more comfortable in this new setting. Though the transition isn't always easy, Michael and Emily's love and patience help Helen to adjust. As time passes, Helen begins to embrace her new life. She starts to see the value in the changes and the new experiences the city offers. She realizes that, despite the challenges, she can still find joy and contentment in this new chapter. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily also learn important lessons from their mother. They come to understand that being filial isn't just about providing material comfort. It's about being present, offering emotional support, and showing genuine care. Through their actions, they learn the true meaning of family, one rooted in love, understanding, and shared experiences. Helen spends her remaining years with a sense of peace and contentment, surrounded by the love of her children. Her days are filled with joy, and her face always carries a smile, knowing that she has a devoted daughter-in-law, Emily, and a warm, caring family. Life in the city gradually falls into a rhythm that suits her, and she begins to adapt to the changes in her environment. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily grow, too. As they learn to balance the demands of their careers with the responsibilities of caring for Helen, they become more considerate and attuned to her needs. Their relationship deepens, and they develop a greater understanding of what it means to care for aging parents. They realize that the balance between family and work is delicate and requires constant effort, but they are committed to making it work. However, life is unpredictable, and challenges arise when Michael receives unexpected news. His company informs him that due to a downturn in business, layoffs are necessary, and his department is the first to be affected. The weight of the news hits Michael hard, and he feels a sudden, overwhelming pressure. "What are we going to do?" Michael mutters to himself, pacing around the living room. "If I get laid off, we'll lose a big portion of our family's income. Everything will change." Emily overhears and walks in, her face filled with concern. Seeing her husband's anxious expression, she makes up her mind to share the burden. "Michael, don't worry too much. We'll find other ways to manage. Let's look for part-time jobs in the meantime. We can get through this together. We've faced challenges before." Michael looks into Emily's eyes, and at that moment, he feels a sense of warmth and relief. Her determination and support give him hope. "You're right," he says. "As long as we're together, we can handle anything." In the following days, Michael and Emily both take on part-time jobs. They work during the day and take on additional shifts at night. Their lives become even busier, but they remain steadfast in their resolve. Despite the exhaustion, they prioritize caring for Helen, ensuring that she always feels the warmth and love of the family. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. Helen, observing her children's tireless efforts, feels both a deep sense of gratitude and a tinge of regret. She realizes that she can no longer be a passive recipient of their kindness and decides to find a way to ease the pressure on them. One evening, as she sees Michael and Emily rush around, trying to juggle their work and family obligations, Helen speaks up. "Michael, Emily, I'm sorry for making you work so hard every day. You've been doing everything for me, and I feel like I need to contribute somehow. The land in our backyard is still empty. Why don't we plant some vegetables? I can take care of it and help you both." Michael and Emily exchange surprised glances. For a moment, they are speechless, then they nod in agreement. They understand that their mother wants to play an active role in the family, and this idea fills them with appreciation for her. Thus begins Helen's journey into gardening. Every day, she wakes up early, carefully taking her gardening tools and seeds to the backyard. Though she's aging, her movements are strong and purposeful. Over time, the barren land transforms into a flourishing vegetable garden, a symbol of her contribution to the family. As the garden flourishes, so too does the bond between Michael, Emily, and Helen. Every evening, Helen asks them to help her harvest the vegetables, and as they do, they chat about household matters, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere in the house becomes warmer and more harmonious, as the simple act of tending to the garden brings them closer together. Through this process, Michael and Emily learn valuable lessons from Helen. They begin to understand that, in the face of challenges, they should not simply worry or complain. Instead, they should adopt an optimistic mindset, much like Helen, who faces difficulties head-on and seeks practical solutions. As time passes, the garden continues to thrive, and so does the family. Michael returns to his regular job, and Emily continues to grow in her career, becoming even more effective in managing her work-life balance. Helen, watching her children grow and flourish, feels immense joy and pride. She knows that their strength and determination to face challenges together have made the family stronger and more complete. She realizes that, even in times of hardship, there is always room for growth, love, and support. And as she looks at her children, she knows that the courage to face life's difficulties has created a bond that will last a lifetime. As we reach the end of Helen's journey, we see the power of love, patience, and the willingness to learn from one another. It's a reminder that no matter how much we give, we always have the opportunity to do better, to be more present, and to truly support the ones we love, whether it's through material means or emotional connection. What have you learned from Helen's story? Is there something that resonated with you, something you're now inspired to put into practice in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below with one lesson that has touched you and how you plan to bring it into your life moving forward. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more stories and lessons. Your support means a lot to us, and we can't wait to continue this journey with you. Thank you for watching, and remember, life is a journey of learning and growth, and it's never too late to start making a difference.